Okay, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday, May 26, 2021. This is the May Community Preservation Committee meeting. We are adjourning launching at 6:35 on the 26th. And this meeting is being recorded, as the little computer voice just told us. I'm the chair, Laura Boretsky. I'm going to start with a roll call. That's what I'm supposed to do. Heather Highmark.
Present.
And Andrew Lau.
Yes.
Tatiana Shannon. Tatiana? I know.
Present.
Thank you. Christina Kennedy is here.
Present.
And Eleanor Ansis.
Present.
And Alan Bingham.
Yes, present.
And Jahan Habib. Not quite yet. And Rose is not even sworn in yet, but en route. So we have quorum. And with that, I think we get to move on to public comments. Do we have anybody from the public here today to make comments? I'm not sure that we do. Okay. And then we have minutes to go over. We have 2 months worth because we had a hearing last month. So in the meeting materials, there were 2 sets of minutes, one from March, one from April. April being the presentation with Stuart Saginaw. March, just a regular meeting. Let's start with March minutes. Any comments or questions or edits that anybody saw from the March CPC minutes?
I have an edit to the March minutes agenda item number 2. It says the motion was brought by Mr. Bingham Highmark. And Alan, thank you very much, but our names are not yet co-joined. So I would strike the Highmark and just make it Mr. Bingham.
Okay.
Thank you. Good correction.
And I saw one little typo. I'm not even sure it's worth mentioning typos, but the word programming on the second to last page, it's page 3, it's the word it's numbered, and the second to last paragraph needs a second M.
Yep, I see that. Thank you.
In this minute, there was a reference to a discussion I had back and forth with Judith about restrictive covenants on open space, in which Judith states that city land is covenanted. And I was just wondering if that could be verified again for me, because I wasn't aware of city land being kind of covenanted, open space on city land being covenanted as a standard.
Through the chair, I believe I will correct the terminology on that. I'll check with the legal team, but I believe that most, or if not all, of the open space is deeded open space in perpetuity.
Alan, I can provide a little bit of clarity here.
Oh yeah, go for it. I'm sorry.
It's generally true. You know, if we've ever applied for a grant, typically federal grant requirements provide that we need to ensure that the land is, it's noted on the deed that the land is protected for either recreational or park uses in perpetuity. But for newer acquisitions, that might not always be the case. But it certainly is the city's goal that it is noted in the deed that that land that becomes open space is recorded in the deed that it is in perpetuity. So I think my question is, what was the context of that?
Okay, I think that makes me feel a little more sort of certain on that clause on the statement in the minutes.
Which agenda item was that, Vice Chair?
I can look it up. It was, it's in the March minutes.
Yeah. I'll find it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make
No,
a
that's
note.
fine. I'll find it. I vaguely it sounds familiar. I'll find it.
I think it's right on agenda item 2, maybe? Up
Yep.
top. Approving the previous month's minute.
Yep.
Any other comments, clarifications, edits to the March minutes? Hearing none, would somebody like to make a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve that. It's Tatiana.
Second.
Oh, Eleanor will second.
All right. All right. I guess I'll do my roll call again. Okay. How about Alan? Can I just say, is there anybody who opposes? Or do I really?
Yeah, I believe you can say if none opposed.
Okay.
Yes, I believe you can say that.
Okay, thank you.
The exact terminology escapes me right now, but you can just ask for any objections.
Okay. And are there any objections to approving the March minutes?
I don't object, but if I wasn't there, should I technically abstain from voting, or can I still vote to approve?
Well, the motion is on the table to approve the minutes. I'm asking if there are any objections. So I think the next, help me out here, Alan, if I got this wrong. I'm just trying to be efficient. With seeing no objections, I'm going to say the motion passes to approve the minutes, and then we can move on to the April minutes. Does that make sense? Am I being proper here?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll figure out in the meantime if if your vote can count, and then I'll reflect that in the official record.
Okay.
I'm trying to, hi, Tatiana here. I was gonna say, I attended like one meeting before I was officially approved, and I couldn't vote on anything from what I remember. It was almost 2 years ago, but I couldn't abstain or disagree or whatever. I could attend, I could listen, but I couldn't actually vote on anything. So for what it's worth, at least a couple of years ago, that was the case.
Okay, I think the question was coming from Christina though. So
Yeah, I know. I'm saying if she's not a voting member yet, I don't think she can abstain. Or even needs to.
No, Christina is a voting member. She just wasn't.
Christina's a voting member. It's Rose who's not confirmed.
Okay, then I'm really confused. Never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Robert's rules stuff. I'd have to look. Ellen, I'm not
Perhaps
sure.
I can help clear this up for you. As the former chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, we found in the rules that, yes, you can vote on the minutes, even if you weren't at the meeting.
Okay.
All right, and I
Thank you.
would assume the same rule applies to the CPA.
Yeah,
Right.
it's all Robert's rules.
It's all Robert's rules for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe now we can officially say these are approved, these March minutes, and we can move on to the April minutes.
You.
Any comments, questions, or clarifications from the April monthly notes, the CPC notes that Alan sent? That was a nice comprehensive recap of Stuart's presentation, I thought. Okay.
I had a question related to these minutes, actually, because this was the minutes where we also captured the Tufts students' evaluation.
Right,
And
yeah. Good point.
I was wondering if we can put time on a future agenda to review their recommendations and discuss how we may implement them or incorporate them.
So thank you for bringing that up through the chair. Couple points I wanted to make tonight related to the Tufts UEP is that And it also kind of, I was going to make this comment a couple items down when we talk about the community preservation plan, which is up for approval tonight. You know, when I took this over from Judith, I kind of saw that some of the metrics were outdated. Some of the ones we haven't been able to verify in a couple of years because we haven't done a happiness survey, some COVID related issues. My goal is to, with the new, when I get the new CPA manager on board, is to have that person do an in-depth review of the Tufts material and some of the evaluation and monitoring metrics in the community preservation plan. So yeah, that is definitely, that is probably a good item for either the July or the December meeting, because I think, or maybe even the September. What it won't be good for is not October and November, because October is where we will hear from this year's project applicants. And then November is where we typically make the awards and then also do the budget reconciliation. So ideally, this is something I plan on revisiting, you know, depending on how quickly we get some hired and how quickly they get up to speed. I'm aiming for either July, September, or December.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the April meeting notes? Okay, hearing none, would somebody make a motion to approve them?
I move
I'll
to
move
approve
that.
the minutes from April.
We're here a second.
I'll second. Somebody will second.
Okay, thank you.
Who seconded?
All right. Was that Tatiana who seconded it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, motion on the table and seconded to approve the April minutes. Are there any objections to this motion for minute approval? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to say that the motion has passed to approve April minutes. And move on to the Blessing of the Bay Park project update. Amber.
Hello, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
So Amber, how would you like to do this? Would you like me to throw up the presentation or can I give you screen control?
You know what, how about give me screen control because I might breeze through a few of them. I was gonna say, I feel like I'm a CPC groupie because I have been on a number of these calls. Let me see. So
Great to have you back.
yeah, here I am. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So I was here formally in, I think it was December, asking for an extension on our grant from 2018. And that was approved. And then since then, I also presented at the virtual hearing, I think it was in April, that a bunch of groups that had gotten grants in the past presented about their work. So this presentation is kind of an amalgam of both of those and then a summary of where we are primarily after working through some of these ideas of what we might do with the money with DCR, who's the landowner, and they've been a partner throughout this. So I'm going to try to breeze through these quickly because I think most of you know a little bit of the context and try to focus on the punchline here. I also was at the Concom last night with Christina, who was Commonality, and then I also spoke with Alan and Andrew a few weeks ago. So I'm trying not to be redundant, but I don't want to leave anyone else out. So these are a few snapshots of what the park looked like when we began the work in 2017. Issues with shared use path, lack of access and visual connection to the river, and just overall deferred maintenance. So we've gotten 2 grants now supporting this project. The first one was fairly simple. It was in 2017. We created a community-driven vision plan, which I'll share a snapshot of that. And then things got really complicated with a lot of DCR leadership changes. And we're trying to figure out what our next step is with the park. Because what came out of the vision plan in the beginning was that everyone wanted to focus on expanding the shared use path as a first step. turns out we couldn't use CPA for that work because technically the path is designated as a sidewalk and it includes some of the road right away. So we were trying to figure out what can we do next that builds on some of the improvements that have been happening. So over the years, we did a lot of community engagement, meetings on site, meetings in meeting rooms, working with all the various stakeholders, the city, DCR primarily, but also Paddle Boston, Gentle Giant Rowing, and folks from Mystic Housing. So this is it's really more of a concept design that we created in 2018 around how can we make the park better connect people to the river, be more ecologically valuable, and some of those park improvement ideas. Here are some renderings of what that might be. And then this is just showing the work that DCR did the last like 18 months or so, which resulted in new trees, new benches, some new paving where there's a blue dotted line. The red dotted line is what the city of Somerville owns. So, you know, we uncovered a lot of great land ownership discoveries throughout this process. And that is really what is the driver for a very protracted process. And so you can see right now they did some reseeding, they planted some trees, they took away a large paved area that was unnecessary. So like a good baseline level of improvements. We talked to DCR, we said, how can we build on the concept design we created, which is built on what the community wanted? What is your definition of success for this park? And that is where we settled on meadows. And this particular graphic has changed a little bit because we're trying to identify where the locations for the meadows could go. Trying to do that in tandem with Concom and DCR on slightly separate tracks. And by meadows, I'm not the technical person on this. We're working with Offshoots, which is a landscape architecture and design build firm who has done a lot of meadows that involve seed mixes and native pollinators. And I don't know all the details of the exact species, but we got into that a little bit last night. So this is the last slide. This was the grant we were awarded in 2018, the $155,000. It was matched with a private grant from the Solomon Foundation for $20,000. Some of it is for my time. We spent a small amount on a survey, I think in 2019. And this is the scope and budget from the consultants to do the design and installation of the meadows. So I'm here tonight to ask for approval to use it for the meadows. When we applied and got the grant in 2018, well, I guess we applied in 2017, got it in 2018. We were going to use it for more design for the shared use path. So in some ways, perhaps the twisting turn of different uses is leading us to something that's more concrete because we're going to focus on something that's built in the park instead of more design, which would then require capital funding. So that's what I hope covers most of what everyone was looking to hear. I'll stop sharing so I can see faces. And I don't know exactly what the formal process here, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, why don't we start with that? People have questions or clarifications they'd like? Presentation.
Amber, can you just run through the numbers again? So the grant was for X dollars, it has been deferred twice, and now we're applying it towards this part. Does it cover this whole project? I mean, can you just run through the financials?
Yeah, it does cover the whole project, and that's why it was kind of the right size next capital improvement because we had 155,738 from CPA plus the 20,000 gives us the 178,000. A portion of it's for my time, like 10,000 or so, which considering I spent 3 years on that, I'm like, probably not enough, but you know, covers my time. And then we did a survey for some of the land ownership issues for the park a couple years ago, and then the rest of it is 144,000. That includes design, establishment, installation, permitting, all of what we would need for the meadow. And we can do it right. You know, there's been a lot of talk about meadows and like, just don't mow. Well, It doesn't really work. You really have to
Mhm.
prepare the soil, and that's what we're talking to Concom about. Is like, how do we do that in a way that meets what they're looking for? We could do some nice edging so that it looks intentional. It doesn't just look like someone forgot to mow the area. So I think it's a nice project, particularly as DCR is doing a number of similar meadows along the Charles River. So now that's becoming standard practice for them. That was the big challenge for a long time. When we did the concept design in 2018, DCR was like, well, we don't do anything except mow lawns and like fix tree limbs that fell down. So, but now DCR has evolved and they're updating their maintenance staff to understand what meadows are. And by having our consultants do all the heavy lifting to get it seeded and established and making sure someone's really watching it, and then DCR can take it on when there's less maintenance, seemed like a good fit.
So Amber, just to clarify, at this point, you're asking to repurpose some of the funding, right? And is the extension also on the table tonight, or has that been approved already?
The extension was approved to next May, and we're going to do this work in the fall. So
Okay.
we're good on that. It's just that when we wrote the grant 4 years now, it was just things have changed, and so we're not using it for design. It's going to be for this installation.
Oh, okay, got it. Other questions for Amber?
Amber, maybe you can give just kind of a high-level overview of your interactions with the Conservation Commission. Are you going to need to get a notice of intent, and what's the schedule? How's the schedule of that going to play into the project?
Yeah, we do have to submit a notice of intent, and last night was our pre-application meeting, just so we were prepared with what Conservation Commission wanted to see. Frankly, the two biggest things that came up is treating the sites where we're going to put the meadows with herbicide. Whether or not we should do that, because that really is going to get us the best product in the end, and there are some downsides, so we need to sort through what are all the alternative methods and why are we looking at the method we're looking at with herbicide. And then the other thing we talked about was, so just getting the NOI hopefully in July was what we were targeting. And Concom wanted to make sure DCR is also in the loop, ideally at the next Concom when we submit the NOI. The challenge is that DCR is working in their own internal process that we don't have a lot of transparency into. So they're going through what they call the green docket review right now. And we can't submit the NOI until they've done their green docket evaluation, and that started a month ago. So I need to kind of check in. I think I'm gonna leverage the 2 meetings that I had this week to tell DCR, okay, I've done this due diligence with the city. Where are you guys with your evaluation? So
Is it DCR has told you can't proceed until you have that approval?
Yeah, well, the other thing is that they wanted to do a site visit to look at the locations for the meadows, which we would need to put in the NOI, but they can't meet until July, even though we met with them in March. That was a lot to wait, which is why we're trying to do some of this
Well, yeah, let me know if you need us to give DCR a call from Public Space and Urban Forestry to help move that process along.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I last heard from DCR 2 weeks ago that it was in process. So
Okay, great.
we'll get through that.
Any other questions?
And also, Christina, did I summarize Concom appropriately? You were there last night, so if you have anything to add.
I think the herbicide was a big issue. Not that we don't necessarily permit projects using glyphosate, but we just want to really understand why that's necessary. I'd say the other thing that came up was just making sure that the soil while the invasive weed bed is getting removed and the native seed bed is getting established, that stays in place and doesn't, erode into the river since it's right next to the mystic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think the other thing to note, because I'm not sure if you said it, was that it is all native species, native to our region. So that's certainly something that the COMCOM does like to see.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that the same consultants that we're working with offshoots was a sub-consultant to Weston Sampson, who did the Charles River vegetation plan over the last 18 months. And that's where they worked through all these questions about what are the native plant communities. And so, you know, it was like a really good tie-in with DCR, where we already know that they're okay with what seed mixes we're proposing here, because they already went through that.
Thank you for the input, Christina. Any other clarifications or questions?
I just have one more comment, not so much of a question. Amber has a meeting set up with both Public Space and Urban Forestry and the city's mobility division to discuss just how this project and Blessing of the Bay more generally is kind of coordinated with mobility improvements. Nothing might come of it, but we're hoping that if there are any mobility improvements planned, that we can make sure we're coordinating with this effort so that we're not going to be in conflict with it in the future.
Yeah, we were really excited. Like, maybe it was 18 months to 2 years ago. We were like, oh my gosh, we can have a win-win-win. We can expand the path, we can reduce the road and the travel lanes, we can add street trees and green infrastructure and get it all. And then it just was too complicated with land ownership and then the CPA not being able to fund it. So I think people were really excited about that. We just have to figure out what's the timing, what's the budget. In the meantime, Brad's office did, I don't know if you've been out to Shore Drive, but they did move the center line, so the travel lanes are narrowed and there's bike lanes striped. So it's a good incremental step towards the bigger picture vision.
So as with many of these projects, it's moving forward.
Moving
by
forward,
step.
you know,
Yeah.
meandering way, but moving forward.
Right. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I guess I was just going to comment. I'm in favor of approving this, and I'm going to trust to the process that you have to go through with conservation and DCR, that the idea of establishment in a meadow I know is very tricky, and that handoff will be sort of worked out, and that the funds will cover that. And it's, you know, I just want to, I guess I'm going to trust in the process that that in the end the funds will be adequate to cover everything, even if, say, you don't get your approval in the July meeting. But what happens if it goes to August? Are you still going to be able to bring this kind of to fruition?
Yeah, I think our window of installation is September to October, so that's what we need to try to get to. Never knew how complicated meadows were until I've gotten into this.
Would somebody like to make a motion to approve Amber's request to redirect the funds to the installation phase?
I'll make a motion to approve the reallocation of funds to the work proposed.
And I'll second that. This is Heather.
Great. Okay. I guess I will do a roll call this time because it's more, I don't know, bigger than just approving notes. I don't know. My intuition. So, Heather made the motion. Andrew?
Aye.
And Tatiana?
Aye.
And Eleanor?
Yes.
Alan Bingham?
Yes.
And Jahan never joined us, right? Okay. And I think I got everybody. The motion passes.
Thank you.
All right.
Who made the motion? Tatiana made the motion and Heather seconded?
I made the motion, Christina.
Christina made the
Christina,
motion.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it. Really, the flexibility is just key with these projects where there's stakeholders and things outside your control that could be difficult. So we really appreciate you sticking with us. All right.
Onward ho, and good luck.
Thank you. I'll keep you in the loop, and we'll be back to Concom soon. So, all right. See y'all.
Take care. Okay,
Thank you.
and so now we are going to move on to a debriefing of the presentations and testimonies from the FY22 virtual hearings.
So for that, let's see. I basically, through the chair, most of what was covered in the last meeting is in the April minutes. We heard from several participants in the CPA program. We heard from, we had a brief explanation of summer vision. We had the Tufts team UEP analysis. So really, as much as a recap, I think the recap is pretty well laid out in the April minutes. So I think for the remainder of the time allotted for this item, I'd just like to open that to any discussion regarding any of the specific presentations, any more in-depth questions on the UEP work. I'll open it up to the committee as to how they want to debrief from last session.
I have a question, which is more that given the kind of the passing of the baton, Alan, and you're stepping in and you're doing a beautiful job, helping us as our temporary CPC manager. I'm just wondering how is that going, and are there applications coming in? Because I guess there's a June 10th pre-application due for anybody who's looking to partner with the city on a project.
Thank you. Through the chair to the vice chair. So the position has been posted on the city web. It's been out for about a week and a half. I checked this morning. There are about 5 applicants. I hope to be calling people in for the first round by next week. Obviously it's a personnel matter. I can't comment in too much detail, but there have been some fairly attractive applicants. And so I'm hoping we get a talented pool. My hope ideally would be to have someone in for the June meeting, although most likely you're stuck with me for another meeting in June. Most likely I'll be running the June meeting. If I have that position hired, I'll probably have them on the meeting and introduce them to everybody and have them get their feet wet. But again, as you may remember, that was one of the main analysis points of the UEP fieldwork, was that the CPA manager was critical. So it's a balance of, I don't want to leave the position vacant too long because it's clearly not my area of expertise. But at the same time, hiring the right person is critical. I'm confident that the position will be hopefully resolved by the next meeting, even if that person isn't ready to step in, most likely for the June meeting. And then, I have some things just based on my observations from the time I spent since taking over the CPA in my division, that I think, the new CPA manager can focus on and improve on. And a lot of it will be from the analysis that the UEP team did in terms of, getting a broader base of the community involved in applying and, making sure that, our metrics are aligned with our goals and things of that nature.
Thank you for that. Heather, were you asking if I thought what Heather was asking, and I'm also interested, is that whether or not you'd received any preliminary applications yet with the deadline coming up for the next round?
No, so what typically the process that I understood it to be in talking to Kristen and my debrief with Judith before she left is the application material is here for your review and approval tonight. And I didn't want to make those officially public on the website without your approval and final comments.
We go to it, right.
We will get to this in a later item, but I tried to make minimal wholesale changes. The edits I have remaining are any comments that I get from you, and we can do this now or get to it later. But the one thing I felt was important to incorporate that I've heard in the last several meetings is that there wasn't enough pre-screening of the historical projects,
Right.
especially with the HPC. So I tried to make that clear in the application instructions that, you should at least be in front of the HPC and seeking their guidance. When we get to that section, we can debate how much we want to enforce that and, where in the process we want to enforce that. But that's really the major change. And then I have to go through and just make some edits, which will be a little awkward, right? Because this material is going to be out for 2 weeks. It's, I can't use Judith's contact information. My contact information is really for a limited time, and then I don't know the final CPA person. So I'll work with the communications team, and I might just put in like a generic email that goes to an email box or figure out something like that. But that's sort of clerical. That's the big clerical item left remaining, and I hope to have those posted by Friday so that if anyone here is aware or is recommending for anyone to apply for a project that would need to be sponsored by the city, we do have a short window of a couple weeks to get that in. And most of those, I think, typically have ended up in open space. So, I would probably turn to Andrew or Louisa as your first point of contact.
Mhm. Okay. Bringing it back to this agenda item, were there items of discussion or questions about the presentation? So the summary of which are in the notes on the screen right now, and Alan's screen, that we want to go over?
Yeah, if there was anyone in particular that you wanted to reread their presentation or wanted to rehash anything, I'm happy to bring up the notes from that presentation.
Okay.
I don't have any particular questions with the debriefing of the presentations.
Okay. I mean, I hopefully tried to capture as much as I could in the minutes, so.
Good job.
Okay.
I don't think we need to particularly vote on this item either.
Right. This is here for information. At some point, there will be voting that happens on the applications that come in, right?
Yep.
All right.
We can just approve this discussion as part of next month's meeting minutes, I guess.
Okay.
Does that sound right, Alan? I haven't really chaired too many committees, so.
You're doing a good job.
All right. Well, then, hearing no other questions, then we can move on to the finalization of the community preservation plan.
Thank you. So before I put up the actual plan on the screen, I did want to go over, as you all are aware, so the major item that is meant to be discussed in the finalizing of the CPP plan is really the allocation of the 4 buckets, being the Affordable Housing Trust allocation, the open space, the historic, and then the budgeted reserve. So those are all in the plan. And historically, to inform that plan, we've done the CPP survey. You know, obviously, Chair Boretsky, as I believe you mentioned this in the meeting last month or 2 months ago, a lot of our typical, you know, sort of, I guess, on the street or public outreach that we've done via either summer streets or the tabling or whatnot was shelved this year due to COVID. We did have the online survey. I'm going to present those results next. The survey was up for slightly over 2 weeks from, I think, the April 28th meeting to, I believe, May 12th. So with that being said, we only had 14 participants. So keep in mind when you see these survey results, that they are survey results of 14 recipients, 14 respondents. So with that, these slides are in the CPP presentation, but they're kind of squashed in there to fit them into the Word or the publisher doc. So I just thought I'd put them in PowerPoint and just review them with you. So the survey was posted on the CPA webpage. Results were taken from April 28th to May 16th, for a total of 14 respondents. And just to, you know, capture the first question, which is a pretty basic question, is, you know, are you aware of the CPA, or were you previously aware of the CPA before this meeting or before taking the survey? 100% of the respondents said yes. The second survey is, where did you hear about the CPA? 21% of respondents had heard of the CPA from multiple sources. So there were, you know, it was a check the box question, so you could choose multiple sources as your answer. 43% of the respondents said they had heard of it from the city website, and 36% of the respondents reported having heard of it from a community event such as summer streets or some other tabling event. So clearly this year our outreach was a little bit more limited than historically because of some of the COVID restrictions. And, you know, also kind of following that trend, it's clear that, you know, the online marketing of the program and you know, perhaps future social media use is of continued importance. Based on your understanding of the CPA, question number 3 was, based on your understanding of the CPA, which of the following could the CPA fund? 93% of respondents were aware that these funds could be used for affordable housing. 87% of respondents were aware they could be used for open space and recreational space, and 93% were aware that this was available for historical preservation. You know, these were anonymous results, but you know, as you'll see in some of the upcoming questions, my guess is you know, a lot of the people that answered these were either former grantees or had some sort of former direct exposure with the program. So on a similar note, one of the questions was, list any projects you know of that have been funded or are currently funded by the CPA. And this was kind of an open-ended question. So 43, the most noted individual project was Somerville Museum, with 43% of the people named Somerville Museum. You know, even if they mentioned the Somerville Museum and another project, 43% of the 14 respondents noted Somerville Museum in their response. The second most noted individual project was West Branch Library. And then 57% of respondents could name at least 3 CPA projects. 79% of respondents could name at least 1 CPA project. And I believe 1 or 2 respondents just left the question blank. So clearly, again, this probably just shows that, you know, the respondents of the survey were well versed in the program. Question 5, which I will leave up on your screen for a few minutes and allow a few minutes for comments amongst yourselves, this is the big one. So this is, if you had $100 to allocate, how would you allocate it among the 3 categories of primary funding? So that's affordable housing, open space, and recreation, and historic. And you must allocate a minimum of $10 to each. So for affordable housing, 43% of respondents responded that 40% was the ideal affordable housing allocation. 29% of respondents responded that the ideal allocation was 50%. And then 14% responded that either 30 or 60% was the ideal allocation. So, you know, I believe it was split one each. One person felt 60% was the ideal allocation. One person felt that 30% was the ideal allocation. If you blended them together, you probably are right there in that 50% allocation where we sit today. And that's just kind of how you read these results. I can go through them all verbally, or I can just leave them up to the screen. I will turn on my camera and see head nods as if do you want me to keep going reading the results, or if you prefer to just read them on the screen and discuss, or?
I think we can read them on the screen, frankly, Alan.
Okay, sure. So for open and recreational space, 57% of respondents said the ideal allocation for open space was 30% of the funds. 21% of the respondents thought 20% was the ideal open space allocation, and 7% responded that 50% of open space was the ideal open space allocation. In historic, 57% of the respondents said that 20% was the ideal allocation. 36% of the respondents felt that 30% was the ideal allocation, and 7% responded that 50% towards historical preservation was the ideal allocation. You know, obviously the delta of all three of these would leave the budgeted reserve minus our admin allocation. And so 50% of the respondents felt that, you know, there's no need for a budgeted reserve. 43% of the respondents felt that a 10% budgeted reserve was the ideal flexible reserve. And then 7% of the respondents felt that 20% should be left flexible to be allocated to whatever, you know, that the committee deems those year's best projects. So with that, you know, feel free to ask any questions if any of my interpretation was not clear, or just feel free to start discussing amongst yourselves.
Hey,
I'm a
Alan,
little, go ahead, Andrew.
I have a question. In past years, how many respondents have we typically received for this kind of survey?
I would have to go back and research that, but my gut intuition, just based on, you know, the lack of public outreach that we weren't able to do, I would probably guess that it's significantly higher.
Yeah, I think my comment with regard to that is, I know it's been a difficult year, and I think we can let everyone off the hook, but this seems to be a really important step in our process, and to have 14 respondents, you know, it's just from a statistical perspective, you know, to say 7% of people responded to a question, that could be like 2 people, right? So I just think we need to kind of take that with a grain of salt and really focus on, in future years, how we can get more people to provide input.
Yeah, I think through the chair, I think part of the reason was the timing was difficult. You know, I think we've been a little bit behind the 8 ball since COVID, and so I think just having the survey out there longer, and then also maybe publishing it a little better in online formats, you know, especially since it was COVID, would have helped out. But I think next year, one of the definite improvements is to increase the length of the survey window, and then also hopefully we'll have that more, you know, direct public outreach. Laura can probably speak to this better than I can, but you know, there's probably something to be said where you can draw more people in if you're like tabling at an event, or you have some like flashy thing, versus if someone actually has to navigate to the web page to click on it and consciously take it. Whereas if, you know, you're just walking by Summer Street events and you're like, oh, that's a cool table.
Yeah, I call myself to speak to that. I don't know the exact number either, Ellen, but I know I was out there at the tabling multiple times, and those jars with the pom-poms, they were pretty full. So it was dozens and dozens of people by the time it was all said and done, because CPC folks tabled at multiple places over the summer, and it was always during the summer at the festivals, and so it's a nice. It's a very tactile activity, right? People, they see the sign, oh, CPC, I'm kind of interested in that, and then here's these pretty pom-poms, and you give them something to do, and they think, and so it's simple. You're not asking for money. You're giving them something to do. It draws people in. That's my experience collecting this data. So this is the 14 is disappointing. I'm just speaking based on previous year's experience. And I'm sort of curious to know if I mean, I don't expect you to have this info, Ellen, but I am curious to know how it compares to the survey, responses in years past. And then,
Yeah, I think that's a takeaway item. I will address that. I'll address that as a post-meeting follow-up, and I'll either email the committee with a brief summary, or I will bring it up as like a 5-minute item in the June meeting.
Tatiana here. Sorry, one moment. I have a question, and it's possible I'm misremembering this, but I thought during some of our Zoom meetings, we did give community members who were attending the meeting the opportunity to do a digital equivalent of the fuzzy pom-poms. Am I misremembering that?
No, that's correct.
No, that definitely occurred at the last meeting, and those should be in the 14. Those should be in the 14 results. I think at the last meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, Laura, Chairwoman Laura asked several times for people to fill out the survey, whoever was on the virtual hearing.
Okay, so those results include the digital, include the
at least for that, at least for the April. At least for the April 28th meeting.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yep, and the April 28th meeting probably had one of the larger public participation turnouts that we've had. I also think it's anonymous, so I don't want to interpolate the results too much, but I think it probably also skewed which people knew which projects and probably things of that nature.
Right. So I guess the question I have for you, Ellen, is given the small number of respondents, I feel myself echoing what Andrew was saying earlier. I almost feel like we should take this with a grain of salt, and also keep in mind last year's results. Look at both before we make any changes to our buckets, to our allocations to our buckets.
So unfortunately for tonight, we do the other agenda item after the CPP is the budget, where I'll go over the estimated numbers year to date. We do need to come up with an estimated allocation tonight that will go in the budget book. And then the only opportunity to edit or revise that, I won't be able to change the allocations per se, but the funds will change as we get our May and June tax receipts, and we close out the state, the final state match and all those numbers. So numbers will most likely increase in November when we do the budget reconciliation, but this is the meeting where we set the percentages.
So to that end, I have a question about the buckets. For example, if we give open space a bigger slice of the pie and we don't have applications that use up that entire slice of the pie, can we then roll any undesignated funds over? Can they become discretionary funds, or do they then have to revert into some sort of holding account for the next year?
So that is also a good question that I will follow up with the auditing team and get back to you. But my understanding of trying to get a handle on this over the last year is that it works the way you stated, Vice Chair, is that at the end of June 30th, 22, whatever is unused and unallocated would then be available for FY23 projects. So you would kind of potentially miss out on a year's, whatever that delta is, would have to roll over to the next fiscal year. It would not be lost, but it would just, as your description, would roll over to the next fiscal year. So that is my understanding, but I will confirm that.
So for the purposes of approving the plan right now, I guess what we need to do is look at the allocations on page 3 of the plan that you shared.
Yep, I'm gonna try I tried to put it on my screen. Is that what's on my screen now?
Now it is, yeah. You've moved it briefly. So we're looking at this and keeping in mind the results of the survey and everything we're discussing, and deciding whether or not to approve the numbers here on this page, yeah?
Yep, I will review the actual dollar amounts when we do the estimated budget, which I believe is the next item. The key point for discussion in terms of the CPP plan that I will amend based on your vote is the CPA percentages.
Right.
So
Right.
one of the buckets that doesn't ever show up on the survey, and I can understand why, is this last item, the admin and operating. So that's actually like a fifth item. And I can see why you don't survey the public on that. But if we were to reduce that to say 3%, it would cover the salary of the manager plus some. Isn't that correct? Is my math right?
Yep, I can do that. So
what I'm thinking is, unless we have a specific project like the video or anything that we did with that sort of extra money in the budget last year, unless we have a specific project in mind, we could probably make that a 3%.
I mean, we could, but then if we run up against extra administrative costs or operating costs that we haven't foreseen, we're kind of out of luck that year.
yeah, I actually don't know that would cover the. Let me see. So if
Alan,
look at my other
can you kind of give a background of
There's
why
also a mathematical issue with the open space and recreation reserve projects. If you look at the last column, it says total available for 22 is 63,000.
Alan, do you know the background of why that is 5%?
I believe 5% is the maximum we can take by CPA rules, and so we've traditionally taken that. Yes, and whoever noted that is yes. I need to add a 9 in that final column. But to.
I see Rose is asking a question about whether or not the 159 includes benefits as well, or is that?
No, I believe that's picked up by the city.
Right. I saw like in some other spreadsheet somewhere there was like a split between what the CPC funded and what came from the city.
Yes, that's true. That is on the bottom of the. That is on the bottom of the budget that we will review in the next item. So 20% of the CPA's manager's role is meant to cover just general city work, which is picked up by the general fund. So the CPA manager is actually 80%. If you want to look at it from strictly technical perspective, the CPA manager is only 80% dedicated to the CPA program and 20% general city purposes.
Alan, can we go back to the survey results for just a second?
Sure.
Yeah, actually, maybe even have them side by side, because I'm looking at the results on the computer, but I'm finding it helpful to be able to look at both at the same time.
I
don't know.
again have two questions about the process as it pertains to question number 5. The first question is kind of how this was structured for the respondents. It seems like they were kind of fed the answer choices for 40, 50, 30 for affordable housing, 30, 20, 50 for open space. Is that correct?
No, so they could choose anywhere from 0 to 10 in increments of 10.
Why in increments of 10? I make that point because 1% of our budget is $25,000.
Got it.
And it's continuous data. So I'm just wondering, like, why don't we, in future years, just allow people to select exactly the percentage that they want, rather than forcing them into these 10% categories?
That is a good point. I will note that as a potential process improvement. And
then I think it's also really important that we make it clear that it's not 100%, it's 95. If we, as a committee, are saying we're taking 5% of that out for our administrative costs.
right, through the chair, I believe the thinking behind that would be that, you know, of the money you could allocate, how would you allocate 100% the 3 categories, with the assumption that we wheel back the 5% off the top. It's just, you know, this is your pie. How would you allocate that pie, regardless of any administrative purposes, right? Like, that number will be what that number is, but, you know, of the remainder that's available for these 3 categories, how would you want them split across those 3 categories? I think is the intent of the question. But okay. I hear you. For full disclosure, we should probably either as an asterisk or as a side note.
Yeah, I think as an asterisk, just so folks know, full transparency. Hey, 5% of this money is coming.
Yep.
Up for admin.
Yeah, but while we're talking
and in
about
the city's budget.
And Andrew, I agree with you and Tatiana that 14 isn't a sufficient sample to be able to make any decision on. I mean, this is a reasonably big city with a big population, and 14 is inadequate. There's no law of big numbers kicking in here, which can give us an accurate statistical result that we could move on.
Yeah,
so I don't think this is at all usable because of that.
I was going to say the same thing as Alan. I don't think we should even be looking at the survey. And clearly the people that responded were probably very biased to certain.
Yeah, but I do think the point here, through the chair, is that this is a really important part of our process, and we need to really think hard about how to improve this in the future.
Right. So maybe it should be an agenda item on a future meeting to really go through what the survey is and how it's distributed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And to Andrew's point, how the questions are asked, so the questions are not self-serving.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, good point. So I'm hearing a lot of people saying, and I agree with this too, that the survey results, it wouldn't be proper to allow the survey this small to influence influence us to make big changes, basically, to these allocations on in the plan here on page 3 or wherever, what was up earlier. So I wonder if maybe somebody would make a motion, if it makes sense that somebody make a motion to keep the allocations as they are, because the survey results aren't big enough.
Well, I'm not so sure I agree with that. I mean, the allocations that we have right now, is that rolling it over from last year's allocations? Is that what we're saying?
That through the chair to the vice chair, that is correct. These are flat, stagnant allocations that were voted last year.
Right.
believe they're also the same percentages we used the year prior to that. So we've been sticking with those allocations for a couple of years at this point. I want to say I think your paper says since FY19, but I could be misremembering. Tatiana,
Through
sorry.
the chair and vice chair, it's my understanding that the last major change was a slight increase to the open space to 20%. And that was at least a couple of application rounds ago.
Okay.
So I was looking in one of the forms that you have that had the indicator, sort of the assessment forms that had all of these things through history. It looked like fiscal year 15 through 18, we had 45% for housing, and then it bumped up to 50 in 19 and 20. So that's a fairly recent shift. And part of the reason why I want to bring this up is I think this year we have more money, maybe not as much as in the very early years when there was fewer cities participating, but we do have more money this year than in years past. And I was gonna propose that we consider putting more money. So instead of 15% for historic preservation, which we had a lot of applications for last year, and some of which we could not fund in full, that we consider bringing that up to 20. And that we consider bumping open space up to 30. And we would do that by reducing the flexible budget down to 2% and the admin budget down to 3% and the affordable housing down to 45 from 50. So I know that this is probably going to be controversial, but I thought that with the increased pie, that for some people it means that they will actually have about the same budget that they had before. So that was something I wanted to put on the table.
I have a clarifying question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that for the past, I believe, 2 years, we've been using the results from survey from 2019 for the allocation. Is that the correct understanding?
Tatiana here. I don't think that's the case. I believe we've had a survey every year, unless I'm totally misremembering. But the results from the community have remained relatively consistent. Now, part of that might be because when people come up to us on the street fairs, because I did do some tabling, not as much as Laura, but I did some, they often ask what the existing allocations are. And I think a lot of people felt like, given the affordable housing needs in Somerville, 50% was a good solid round number. But I just wanted to say, I think we do, if I'm remembering correctly, we do a survey every year.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see the results and the number of respondents from previous years, just to kind of put this all in context.
If you, I'm afraid to do this and lose my connection, but you know what?
I did check quickly
really
on, sorry, I checked quickly on the website, and last year's survey was 36 people. I couldn't find results of prior surveys.
Was there 36 people resulting in the 50%, correct? I think you're correct.
Yeah, I don't think last year was a particularly huge pool either. I remember sort of thinking that it was a pretty slim.
This again,
and I don't think it dictates actually exactly how we do it. I think it's supposed to inform us. And we.
I'm gonna keep beating this drum. There are 80,000 people who live in the city. I really don't know if we can listen to the voices of 14 and 36 people. I'm not saying those people's voices aren't important, they are, but we need to somehow figure out our process to engage more people to hear from them.
Yes.
I don't know exactly how it works, aside from the street fairs, and you know, the link on the city's website. But do we ever try to reach out via social media? Is, you know, like the town's Facebook page, would it be legal or plausible to ask organizations who have been past or current recipients of CPC funding to share our survey? Admittedly, respondents who follow, say, the Elizabeth Peabody House versus the Somerville Museum versus the Mystic Watershed Association are going to have a somewhat biased opinion, but it would get us out to a slightly broader audience that is already invested in CPC funding commitments.
No, thank you. Through the chair to the committee. Yes, I think there is a vast improvement, and obviously, I think COVID has highlighted the need and the efficacy of improving our social media outreach and the importance of our social media outreach. So I definitely think working in conjunction with the city's communication team, there's a CPC newsletter, which should, I'm sure there's no technical reason why we can't figure out how to attach a link to the CPC newsletter. Also, use platforms like Facebook or Twitter, or I'm sure there's plenty of social media tools that we can investigate over the next year to beef up our social media engagement. I don't think that's going to be an issue for next year. I think, unfortunately, the tail end of the beginning of the application cycle, and then, continuing through what hopefully is going to be the end of the state of emergency soon, I think really impeded our traditional outreach methods, and, perhaps we didn't do the best job of shifting to other forms of outreach.
Well, there was, Heather, I wonder, you put out some numbers, an alternate formula to this allocation. We want to like talk about those. Maybe I would need you to repeat them.
I was thinking about, and this partly, I guess this is influenced by how, if you cannot award all the monies in any one slice of a pie, does it then become discretionary and you can then re-award it to something else, but I was thinking about increasing the funds in historic preservation and in open space. At some point, open space dropped down to where it currently is at, I'm trying to look, there is a historical document, which I find really useful. I think it's page 30 at the end of this report.
Of the CPC? Of
the community preservation plan, I think it was.
Yep, I can try to go there. Sorry, hopefully I don't make anyone dizzy.
I just wanted to chime in on one thing. I've always thought the flexible spending was a pretty useful part of our budget because it allows for sort of shifting trends in who applies for funding in any given year. It's functionally, as I understand the term, discretionary spending, in that if we have an unusually large number of open space applicants one year and a comparatively smaller number of historic preservation applicants, that the 10% flexible funding can be used to meet the needs of open space or vice versa. And I don't think, I'd be strongly in favor of not discarding it just because, or keeping it at the 10% we currently have, just because it allows for us to be a little bit more reactive, I think, to that unpredictability of the application season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the argument for having it. I see that Rose has typed into the chat that she'd like to ask a question. I see no.
Is that okay if I ask a question? I know I can't vote, but can I ask a?
Sure.
I'm wondering if this I mean, this is me with I'm wondering about looking at past projects funded. You know, when I have applied for CPC funds in my day job in the past, I always have to do a lot of work to sort of show the amount of how the CPC dollars leverage other dollars. And I wonder if this, I would love to know how the, you know, in projects in the past, in each of the different categories, sort of how has the CPC funds leveraged total dollars to make these projects happen. I mean, and I know you guys all know that I'm in the housing world, and I know how expensive it is to build housing. And I know it's also incredibly expensive to do historic preservation and also open space. But I sort of feel like that could be a really helpful thing to look at. I know we don't have that tonight, but just
Yeah.
some point in the future.
And I think it's typically going to be the housing category where you have these blended funding sources where it's getting leveraged. I think often in the open space, it might be just straight up CPC funds that they're using. I'm not sure,
Thank you.
although, yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, I'll let if Andrew wants to chime in, he's more than welcome to. But I know, as speaking as the finance director for OSPCD, a lot of the open space projects, you know, are coupled with either park grants or other funding sources. So because our park projects actually tend to be quite, I don't want to use the word expensive, but quite large. And so typically a park grant or a CPC funding round wouldn't get us there. So on quite a few of these, we have leveraged multiple sources.
Just for some context, two of the big projects we're doing in the city this year, Healy Schoolyard and Conway Park, both of those are more than double the entire CPA budget. So these are expensive projects.
Yeah.
The comment I would have, kind of coming back to the process of how we determine this, is I personally feel very uncomfortable with this idea of like listening to these survey results and having those guide us. I think that in the future we can do a lot to improve that process, but if it pushes me in any one direction, I would say it pushes me towards wanting to increase the flexible area of the budget. I feel like I understand that housing issues are critical in Somerville. But I think we really need to think about how we can fix this process in the future. And until then, we need to act on the best information that we have available to us.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on the plan, the allocation?
Well, I just want to comment that there's two categories that have bonds out, both historic preservation and housing. So they automatically have a certain amount of funding that they're getting. So I just want to kind of add that back into the pot of considerations. But I could also support increasing this flexible spending account, because I think that if something's allocated to a part of the pie and then it cannot be used, it would be a shame to have it locked away for another year. The question would be, how do you increase it? Where do you take it from?
Where do you take it from, right?
Do you have a proposal, Andrew?
I don't have a proposal. Initially, I wanted to say, well, let's use, the data, the most recent data we have, but it doesn't sound like that data is even more representative. If it is, in fact, 36 respondents, that's like, again, less than 0.001% of the entire city. So I don't think
I
that,
do believe those were last year's results. That number
I
does
don't
sound
know.
familiar.
I don't know if we can feel like that's particularly reliable.
That was just for the online survey though. And I am looking back in our minutes from last year when we were also voting on the budget for FY21, I guess. So for the summer streets voting, that's thousands of people, it looks like, for the numbers. So that does seem a little more representative of Somerville's population, or a better survey result.
Through the chair, if it helps, I can, Christina, if you have that available for screen share, I can give you control.
Yeah, I can text message you the link.
Or you can just pop it up on your screen.
Oh, okay. So I think, I don't think this is showing the online survey, the 36 people. The top is just from the public hearing. And then table 3 is the summer streets. So that's the breakdown from, it sounds like, the tabling events.
Okay. Which is somewhere better. Or could still be improved.
I can take the screen back.
How about we use those 2019 figures, since that seems to be the best data we have, but then we reduce each of the 3 categories by 5% and move that over to flexible, with the intention of next year improving our data collection so we have better information to inform our decisions.
Can you put it back up, Christina?
Oh, let me give her. Hold on.
So Andrew, the goal there is to get flexible up to 20. Is that right?
Well, I was just thinking, let's try and handicap each of the 3 areas in the same way and give ourselves the maximum amount of flexibility to see which projects come in this year.
So can I ask, I think that somebody said this, and but so if there is money left over, it still at the end of a year, it does stay within its category. It doesn't go back into the general fund unless is that right?
Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I am with the screen share. I am going to confirm this, but it stays in the bucket, and then there is a rollover process. It usually is done with a reconciliation. And then there's always the opportunity to, if a particular project comes up, either like on an emergency basis or, when we make our final decisions, to vote from the unbudgeted reserve. So, the opportunity for that would be most likely in November when we get the final rollover numbers, for example, for this year that's going to close now.
Okay. And so that's probably the same treatment for both unallocated funds and also for funds that are allocated within a certain category, but then but then a project doesn't move forward and the.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But I mean, I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if people have better ideas or thoughts about how we might go about making this decision.
I think we should keep it as is and make a real effort to have a better process next year for getting data, would be my vote.
I could get behind that.
Yeah, but as is doesn't even reflect that 2019 that we were looking at.
No.
You know, so if we're saying that this is going to be our North Star, the survey, then as is doesn't reflect that.
It does seem like that 2019 data is the most people we've had weigh in on this issue in the recent past.
So I've only been here a year, but I feel like I remember we had a similar discussion last year, and I think it was Louisa and maybe Judith as well, who said a lot of thought went into when the decision was made to shift some of the funds a few years ago. And I don't know what all the information was at that time that was taken in, but, you know, I believe they both stressed, you know, not to change funds unless it's really, I don't know, unless we really all agree. It's a bit subjective. I can't quite remember what they said, but I just remember thinking that there was quite a process to what went into deciding to change the percentages.
I thought that was specifically around the flexible fund.
I feel like this is one of these things where, you know, institutional memory is really tough on a committee like CPA. And, you know, in normal times, we'd be reliant on the CPA manager to help educate us about processes that have happened in the past, which again highlights the UP conclusions about the role of and importance of the CPA manager. I'm drawing straws here, folks.
I mean, I'm hesitant to make any leading statements, but I can confirm that Christina's recollection seems accurate.
That the discussion was pertained more to the flexible funds.
No, that you know there was pretty detailed deliberations at the last time the allocations were set, and that, you know, barring any significant change in data or other circumstances, you know, it would be not recommend, well, shouldn't use that word, but should be changing the allocations should be.
Shouldn't be made lightly.
Yes, thank you.
Laura, would you say that reflects your history on the committee as well, that there were extensive deliberations around that?
I believe so. I have to say, I don't have fabulous recall of these kind of things, but I think that sentiment sounds right to me also. That said, I guess I'm sort of curious to maybe get back on the screen, the survey results, the most recent, not the most recent, but the most comprehensive one we have, that Heather was referring to. Just out of curiosity, but.
You know, I'll add one more point that I was just thinking about, that for the affordable housing, because we allocate that then to the
Trust.
That might be, we'd have to think about the ramifications of changing that percentage. So that's a little less flexible than, I'm thinking that they need to understand what money they have and work with. Whereas like for the open space or historic, people can apply and then flexible funds can be easily brought to them. But for affordable housing, it's a different process. I don't know if
I think that's true, but we have more money this year because the filing fees changed and the tax rate changed. So we have a bigger pie than we did last year. But I think what I'm sort of sensing is that perhaps we don't have enough justification at this moment in time to change anything, and that the best course forward is to stick with what Alan had on the screen, the 50% affordable, 15 historic preservation, 20 open space, and 10 flexible fund, and 5 for admin. And if we wanted, we could maybe make admin 3, since we don't even have a person fulfilling that position right now. And it would cover their salary, a full year salary, and put 12 into flexible. I mean, maybe that's the tiny little tweak we can do, which would be an additional $60,000 put into flexible.
Well, I think two things come out to me. Firstly, we don't have any valid data that we can use to justify changing it from public input. The survey doesn't give us what we need because there are only 14 respondents. And the second thing is that when I look at it, historic and affordable basically can easily oversubscribe their budgets and do religiously. We tend to turn people away more than approve them. So while I agree that we could drop the admin down to 3%, I wouldn't like to see affordable drop from 45, or I wouldn't like to see historic drop either. We've got a lot of historic things coming up, and we've got a number of applicants who are coming back, some of them multiple times, I might add. I just really believe that even though the pie is going to be bigger, I don't think we have enough justification to change the slices of the pie.
And right now the slice is 15% for historic, right, Alan?
That's what he's put down, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Despite it being more than that previously.
Alan, could you share that spreadsheet again?
The which one?
The breakdown with the budget that had the current breakdown that you had.
Or the funding allocation?
Yeah.
For the current one? Yeah. Alan, if I may ask you a question while you get that up, is if we were to decrease the admin, as somebody just proposed, would that cover, are there additional admin expenses, significant ones beyond the salary, the manager's salary, and would that be okay?
I mean, through the chair, I think it's been, I think keeping it at 3 is the, the appropriate level, and the most we could go down, because it would cover the CPA portion of the manager's 80% time. The primary other items that are covered under that is, some promotional and communication materials, and then mainly, if projects do apply for feasibility studies, the monies to pay for the feasibility consultants would come out of there. And then also any other deed recordings that we have to do, or any legal fees related to any recordings or any legal work. That's primarily it. I mean, there's some small office stuff. Like this year, because of COVID, we had to buy some computer equipment so that, we could have everyone operating virtually and stuff like that. But I mean, that's small potatoes.
Okay.
So yes, I think 3 would be the lowest we could go, but I think 3 could be sustained.
Okay. I guess what I'm hearing is that there's enough hesitation to tweaking that allocation that's in the plan currently from last year, and not both hesitation because there's a lack of data is what I'm hearing. And so I'm wondering if somebody wants to make a motion to make this minor tweak of cutting back admin and operating from 5 to 3. And
Sorry, I have another question. Alan, you just said that we use some of that admin money for promotion materials.
We can. It would be considered administrative, yes.
I just, hearing that makes me think that it seems like we have a process issue, and a process issue maybe around promotion and communication, which makes me think that we actually really need that money to improve our process in the future.
I'll make a motion to approve the allocation as Alan has it in the draft, carrying it over from last year, 50, 15, 20, 10, 5.
I'll second that.
Okay. Andrew? I'm just doing a roll call now. Yeah. Tatiana?
Yes, I am. I'm good with that. Sorry, I had some technical issues. I dropped out for a moment. I'm back.
Thank you. Christina?
Yes.
Eleanor?
Yes.
Alan, you seconded it, right? So I think that's everybody, and I would be comfortable as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so motion passes to keep the buckets as is for now, with a big promise to improve our data collection. Yeah.
Through the chair, absolutely.
I think too, since the issue of administrative came up, it'd be useful to know what has it been spent on the past few years. Have you spent out the whole 5% each year, or does that roll over?
It would, through the chair, the unused will go over to undesignated, which could be used for emergency purpose, or just goes in the overall undesignated balance. It always stays within the CPA, and any unused portion cannot carry over into the next fiscal year. It would just go into the undesignated reserve.
Yeah, so I'm just curious for the past few years, if you had that breakdown, like was the full used for admin, or was there always some left over?
I can pull the numbers and get that back to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Alan, are there other things about the plan that we need to discuss tonight here?
Through the chair, no, the only other thing that I mentioned earlier that I just want to highlight, it kind of goes along the same lines as data overall, different data collection, not so much outreach information, but just general in the evaluation and monitoring section. I am going to have the new CPA manager revisit all those metrics, just because I think, some of the things, I think it's time to revisit their relevance. Some of the things we might not have even done in the last couple of years. Like, I don't know if we've done a happiness survey lately. I don't know how relevant that is in its current wording. In that portion of it, maybe something, again, we revisit at a, the new CPA manager will have to get their feet on the ground, but maybe a September, December meeting might be a good time to revisit that evaluation monitoring section and give a community outreach process update.
And fill in the missing blanks, like a lot of the demographics was blank, like things that could be there.
Yeah, I think for the purpose of the minutes, I think we should also reflect on, just the events of the recent past to make sure that historically underrepresented people in our community are participating in this process. So we definitely need to collect data on who is participating in this process to make sure that we're hearing representatively from all the voices in our community.
Right. Which would be it's a different piece, like when you're collecting those pom-poms on the street, that's not a form, do you know what I mean? Like we don't track demographics through that data collection.
And it might mean we have to go into those communities and somehow ask those people that don't typically participate in those types of processes. I mean, this is an issue. This is a citywide issue in all of our processes.
It is. And we did go into them in the past. We did go into them, but we didn't collect the demographics,
Yeah.
like
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, and a good chunk of the pom-poms, at least for the events I've tabled, have been put in by kids. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have a vote in our, our distribution process, but I do feel like we might want to get more 18-year-olds versus 8-year-olds. Just saying.
Okay, so much work can be done there to improve the process, and we'll take it up in the near future. Yeah. And
through the chair,
with that,
certainly.
Okay. Then I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item, which is approving the budget.
Yep. So with that, I will. Thank you, Chair. So with that, I hopefully got to balance making sure that I get all the relevant information up, but it's not too squashed. I think Vice Chair Highmark has done a good job of doing her advanced math. So kudos to you to figuring out that CPA algorithm. So as you will notice, in general, the city's tax base is going up as we are finally trying to see, some of our larger developments coming online, and just general overall growth in our commercial and residential base. So that's reflected in the overall surcharge number, and the state match is also going up. I think we'll get final numbers by the time we do the budget reconciliation in November. I think there's a good chance that there'll even be a slight increase from that conservative number that's in the budget right now. Because as Vice Chair Highmark noted, the methodology in the fee increases that go into the state match, that they've had fee increases at the registry, which will help that state match. So the numbers are up. I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, I'm sorry. I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually even slightly higher in, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be shocked if these numbers are even slightly higher in November. That's what I anticipate, but of course for fiscal year budgeting, we always go with our year-to-date conservative numbers. So we'll be at a total projected to be slightly over 3.1, almost $3.2 million The allocations you see here are the allocations we just voted on, which are carried over from the prior year. So, you know, there will be no changes based on the roll call vote we just took. The chart here, which will also be in the city budget book, gives the after debt numbers, which is the gray column. So, you know, we'll have close to $750,000 in open space.
Hey, Alan, we're still not seeing your screen. I'm not sure if you...
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Let me make sure I'm still the presenter. Maybe because I'm not the presenter. That would be the issue.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
we
go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry. So I will start from the beginning and give my spiel quickly because I know the hour is getting late. Surcharge revenue is up mainly just because the overall city's tax base is increasing. State match is also higher than last year, and I anticipate that the final number will come in slightly higher than that. We kept the allocations the same, so the numbers you see here would be what you should expect to see in the book. And then we've also go ahead and project the debt service on the West Branch Library and the 100 homes. So you can see that the final numbers you'll have to allocate in November prior to the budget reconciliation of, you know, when we factor in May and June. So, you know, the numbers in gray are preliminarily the numbers we'll be voting on in November. Of course, we'll do some budget reconciliation to factor in the final numbers for May and June. But those are the estimated numbers. If you want me to call any out, sorry, it's getting close to bedtime here. If you want me to call out any numbers, if you have any questions, I'm happy to field any questions.
Thank you. Comments or questions, anyone?
I move to approve this budget.
Second.
Okay, motion on the table to approve the FY22 budget as is. Can I ask you, can I just ask if there are any objections or, sorry. Okay, I'll just do a roll call. Andrew?
I seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, you did. Tatiana?
Yes, aye. Sorry.
Aye. Christina?
Yes.
Eleanor?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
And that's everybody. The motion passes, budget approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the discussion of the application packet.
Thank you through the chair. Again, with Judith's recent absence, no major attempt on my part to make any substantive changes to last year's application. I do have to go back after this meeting, change any contact information to hopefully some generic contact that will help bridge to the EPA manager. The one minor change, which I did share with committee member Allen in advance and tried to be reflective of the discussions that I've been a part of, is in various places in the application instructions, tried to stress the fact that applicants with a historic application should be engaged with the HPC as much as possible in advance, so that, you know, they're getting the input, and so that it's, you know, not wasting the CPC committee's time of, you know, getting to a funding stage where they won't meet the HPC requirements. In the application itself, if I can share the communication I had with Alan, there was a question of, you know, has this applicant gone through an advisory review? I think it's, you know, if I were to discuss one point, it's, do you want the question to read, you know, has the applicant received the historic final clearance or proper permitting from the HPC, or if we just, want to evaluate the question as is when we're making our funding awards. But maybe it's best if I just let Alan speak to that point, give his thoughts.
Yeah, the way it was initially put out was that the applicant should come before the commission to present. But, they could come before the commission to present, and we might not approve what they want to do. A perfect example was the doors on the former church down in just down off Broadway. I forget the name of it, which were historic doors that they wanted to replace. Well, the commission believes that they should be restored. So there are things like that. It's not only coming before the commission for review, it's coming before the commission for review and approval of the project. Because what we're talking about here is local historic districts over which we have purview as a commission. So just to leave it as saying they've got to come before the commission means they could come before the commission and then say, well, too bad, we're going to apply anyway and get the funding and just do it. And that's not the whole purpose behind this. So basically, if we can get them to come before the commission before they come to the CPA, it's not going to waste their time, it's not going to waste this committee's time, and it's not going to waste the time of the Historic Preservation Commission. It's going to reduce the angst all around. I think it's just a message of being able to clarify to the applicant what steps they have to take in order to have a valid application. I hope that makes sense.
Yep, through the chair, that makes sense. And I'm trying to think if you have any recommendation or if there's any edits I can make to the application materials. I don't know if that's, would it be helpful in your opinion to add that as a question in the eligibility determination form?
I just want to play devil's advocate for a moment on that, where I totally agree that it should go to the Historic Commission and be reviewed, approved in order to receive the funds. But just like the Mystic River tonight hadn't finished going through conservation, they didn't have that order of conditions yet. They're in the process of doing this whole thing. So, I mean, couldn't we let people be kind of in the process, and then the final funding is kind of contingent upon receiving approval?
Well, the way it happens now is that, and we've had several instances where people didn't come before the commission, is it comes before the CPC for approval of funding, and then all of a sudden, well, hang on, you haven't seen the Historic Preservation Commission yet. So that causes an unnecessary delay. So basically, this should streamline it and take out any unnecessary delays. They've got to know, first of all, whether the project is something they can do before they apply for funds to do it. I mean, this is the logical progression of how things work. Can I do this? If so, how much would it cost? And then when could I do it? So I hear what you're saying, Heather, but I really think that they've got to come before us first to get the approval for the project. Basically, everything that comes onto the historic agenda for CPC funding basically is something that's dependent upon Historic Preservation Commission approval. And that could be a certificate of non-compliance. It could be any sort of different certificates that the city issues, depending on what the particular job is. And it could be broken down into parts. So I think it's very important, because where you get a large project with a number of parts in it, windows, doors, things like this, fixing the slate roof. The slate roof might be something that, yes, but the door might not be, and the window might have a change. Instead of replacing, it might be restoring. So all these would have different monetary functions behind them. So while I understand what you're saying, I think there's a progression that should take place. And currently the way it's been is that the applicant has not been fully aware in many cases, unless of course they're fibbing to us, that, you know, they've got to get this approval. We are talking about, at this point in time, local historic districts. We're not talking about, you know, general.
Heather, I would just say, I think the comparison between Conservation Commission and the Historic Commission here is maybe a false equivalency. Like the Conservation Commission in that case is evaluating the project from a water resource impact perspective, whereas it seems like the Historic Commission in this case is evaluating whether the resource even counts as being considered historic, and if it is, what part of that resource is considered as historic. Is that correct, Alan?
Yeah. Correct.
Well, if they're already on the register, it's already been determined they're historic. I'm willing to give on this. I was just saying that, you know, if someone hasn't made it all the way through that process, then they'll just have to wait for the next year's funding, is what we're saying.
Through the chair, and
they're in a panel, you know, parallel, if they're doing a parallel process.
through the chair, I think that was more of the intent of the changes that I made. That most of the changes that I made were in the instructions, and my communication strategy, especially when I get the new CPA manager on board, is, you know, for me, the key place where I want to capture this is, you know, from the point where someone, as soon as someone provides myself or the new CPA manager with an eligibility determination form, my first step is going to be to have it reviewed by Sarah White and the Historic Preservation Planner team. And if they need to be referred to the Historic Preservation Committee, then, you know, at least in July, when I present to you the eligibility determination forms, you know, you should, depending on, you know, how that overlaps with when the HPC is scheduled, you will already know that these people are in contact with the HPC to undergo a review, so that by the time you're actually deciding to award them any funds in November, I'm hoping between July and November, they would be through the process. I don't know what the backlog is or what the caseload is in HPC. And I assume, do you meet once a month, twice a month?
We meet once a month on the third Tuesday in the month.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that any projects that are applied for CPC in July would be able to fully go through the HPC, whatever approvals they need from the HPC, they would be able to do that between the July-November timeframe when you would be voting on any awards.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Actually, if I may, I have a question. A question about the application packet materials, a technical one. This is on the 7th or 8th page of that document. It's the first page of the funding cycle application instructions. Your submission, the submission section, it's point D says that 11 double-sided copies and 1 digital are required. And I was just surprised because I didn't think we required hard copy anymore. Am I wrong?
That might have been, I don't know how that would have even worked last year. The digital copy is absolutely required. I will review that and if appropriate, strike that. And my intent will be, if any committee member needs a hard copy, I am more than happy to myself or someone on my team provide you with a hard copy and get that to you, whatever means necessary.
Yeah, I think we've been digital for a long time now.
Okay, that's good to note. I will strike that.
I think. Anybody else?
I think that would be very uneco-friendly.
Yeah, 11 is a lot. Even like the most old-fashioned foundations I work with have switched and stopped asking for that many at work. Okay.
I think it was probably meant to cover all the committee members, you know, the CPA manager. I can't even figure out who else, but yes, we can address that.
Okay, so a minor tweak, that's all I noticed. Any other comments or questions about the application packet and materials?
I just have a minor comment, not on the application, but just on the website, since I happened to see it when I was looking. In the section of the website where it says apply for CPA funding, there's a timeline, and it says pre-applications due on June 10th, but it doesn't specify that that's only for if you're working with the city or for feasibility. So I just wondered, because someone might glance at that and think, oh, I missed the deadline, I can't apply for CPA this year.
I was waiting for any final comments at this meeting. I'm hoping by Friday at the latest. I'm actually thinking, because I believe the 10th is a Thursday, I believe I'm going to extend that to the 11th just to make it an even Friday. I'm going to check my calendar right now. And I will revise that language to say it's for city sponsored and projects on city land. Yep, I'll make that clear. Yeah, it's currently the 10th, which is a Thursday. I think it probably makes more sense to make it the 11th to make it a full week.
Yeah.
And I think I made that change in the materials as well.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions, clarifications on this? Hearing none, does somebody want to make a motion to approve the materials with the tweaks we've just discussed?
I can move that.
That was Andrew who said that, or Alan, I'm sorry.
I said
That was
that.
Alan. I'll second.
Okay, great. All right, so motion on the table to approve the application packet with the tweaks discussed. Heather? Okay.
Yes, here.
Yes, thank you. Tatiana?
Aye.
And Christina?
Yes.
Eleanor?
Yes.
And myself, thumbs up, and I think that's everyone. So motion passed.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, we're at other business already. And I know, Heather, you had discussed wanting to do a quick review of just meeting the topics and dates.
Super quick. So we have a meeting in June and July. August is off, and then in September we start our sort of reviewing of the applications. And we will just distribute that. I know that I think in terms of the applicants, just so that people are aware of that, I think there is a meeting that, so there's the June 10th, which we just switched to 11th for the feasibility and the projects on city land. And we're asking people to get through historic preservation or to contact historic preservation by July 12th. And there is another meeting for applicants on July 1st, which will Alan or the new manager will run. So that's it. I won't review the July and the June and July agendas, but just to kind of give people a little heads up about where we're going the next couple of meetings.
Right, and the process for the applicants out there, keep our brains around it, right? As we venture forth. Thank
And
you.
I guess with the summer streets picking up again, maybe we should think about if we're going to resume tabling and surveying in-person efforts, because I think they're starting in June, aren't they?
Right, June 5th, I think, is Somerville I read today. Yeah, Carnival, if I'm not mistaken. Good point.
I will, thank you. I will reach out to communications this week and figure out. Yep, let me try to get back to you early next week on that. Is the 5th, remind me, is the 5th, is that a Saturday or a Sunday? It's a Saturday.
The 5th is a Saturday. The 6th is a Sunday. It might have been over both days. No, that doesn't make sense. I think it was the 5th. I read it in an email today and I did not write it down.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let me see what I can do to get back to you on that front.
Okay, and our next meeting is the 23rd at 6:30. It will still be in go-to format regardless of what's going on with restrictions being lifted, correct? Just to verify
I will
that.
also, through the chair, to be determined, I will get back to you on that. My last understanding is we're waiting on some final determinations from the state as to how they're gonna lift the state of emergency. And you know, there's also some uncertainty as to whether we want to continue to give the public some sort of hybrid option. But as soon as I know anything, I will share that, obviously, because it impacts everyone as to whether we have to attend in person or not.
Or not, right. Are there,
It also depends schedulings, because I imagine, I don't know if, you know, we would want a bigger space or how that works out. But I can tell you that there's plenty of brains in City Hall working on this right now. So
I bet. Are there areas of other business anybody else want to bring up at this time?
I just had a quick question for the Tufts student group. Did they, and I may have missed it in my email, did we already get their final report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, if you don't have it, let me know. I can try to. You can just email me directly.
Anything else?
Can you email me a copy too?
Sure. Great. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Hearing any other business? Any other questions? Alan?
No. Nope.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I can make that motion.
I'll second.
All
Christina.
in favor? Thank you, Christina. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. And so I will call the meeting over at 8:42, May 26th.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you
Thank
all.
you. Have a good night.
Ditto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay
Good
well.
night.
Bye.
Thank you.